violence, or limitations to our movement. Our main goal then is to maintain the comfort and security we have. And so we become more sensitive to the slightest risk or threat to the status quo. We find it harder to tolerate feeling of fear because they are more vague and troubling. So we remain in the passive mood. Throughout history, however, there are people who live in such tighter circumstances, danger pressing them on a daily basis. These type must comfort their fear in the active mode again and again. This could be growing up in extreme poverty, facing death on the battlefield, or leading in an RV in war, living through tumultuous revolutionary periods, being a leader in a time of crisis, suffering personal loss or tragedy, or having a brush with death. Countless people grow up in our or in which circumstances and their spirit is crushed by adversity, but a few rise above. It is their only positive choice. They must confront these daily fears and overcome them to submit to the downward pull. They are toughened and hardened to the point of steel. Understand, no one is born with this way. It is unnatural or not real feeling. It is process that require challenge and treats. What separates those who go under those who rise above adversity is the strength of their will and their hunger of power. At some point, this defensive position of overcoming fear converts to an offensive one, a fearless attitude. Such type learn the value not only of being unafraid, but also attacking life with a sense of boldness, urgency, and unconventional approach, creating new model instead of following old ones. They see the great power this bring them. It soon become their domination dominant mindset. We find these types in all culture and all time periods. For Socrates and Stoics to Cornelius Vanderbilt and Abraham Lincoln. Napoleon Bonaparte represent a classic fearless type. He began with his career in the military just as a French revolution exploded. At this critical moment in his life, he had to experience one of the most chaotic and terrifying period in history. If he faced challenge, endless danger on the battlefield as a new kind of warfare was emerging, and navigate through innumerable political intrigues in which one wrong move could lead to the guillotine. Guillotine. He emerged from all of this with the fearless spirit, embracing the chaos of the time and the vast changes going on in part of the war. And in one of the innumerable campaigns, he expressed the word that could serve as the motor of all fearless types. In the spring of 1800, he was preparing to lead an army into Italy. His field marshals warned him that the Alps were not passable at the time of the year and told him to wait, even though waiting would spoil the chance for success. The general replied to them, "For Napoleon's army there shall be no Alps." And mounted on a mule, Napoleon proceeded to personally lead these troops through treacherous terrain and past innumerable obstacles. It was the force of one man's will that brought them surprise and defeating them. There are no Alps and obstacles that can stand in the way of the persons without fear. Another example of type would have been to the great abolitionist writer Frederick Douglass, who was born into slavery in Maryland in 1817. As he later wrote, slavery was a system that depends on the creation of the deep level of fear. Douglass continued forced himself in the opposite direction. Despite the threat of severe punishment, he secretly taught himself to read and write. When he was whipped for his rebellious attitude, he fought back and saw that he was whipped less often. Without money or connection, he escaped to the north at the age of 20. He became a leading abolitionist, torturing the north and telling audience that the evils of slavery. The abolitionist wanted him to stay on his lecture circuit and repeat the same stories over and over. But Douglass wanted to do much more, and once he again rebelled, he found his own anti slavery newspapers and unheard of the Act for the Farmer Slaves. The newspaper went on to have tremendous success. At each stage of his life, Douglass was tested by the powerless odds against him. Instead of giving into fear, a whipping, being alone on the street of unfamiliar critiques, Facing the wrath of the abolitionist, he raised his level of boldness and pushed him further onto the offensive. This confidence gave him the power to rise above and fierce resistance and animosities of those around him. This is the physique. This is the physique that all the fearless type discovered at this some point and appropriate retrenching up of the self belief and energy was facing negative or even impossible circumstances. Fearless people do not emerge inclusively from poverty and harsh physical circumstances. A Franklin Delano Roosevelt grew up in a wealthy, privileged family. At the age of 39, he contracted polio, with paralyzing him from the waist down. This was a turning point in his life, and he faced a severe limitations to his movement and possibly at the end of his possible cancer career. He refused, however, to give in the fear and downward pull on his spirit. He went the opposite direction, struggling to make the most of his physical condition, developing an indomitable spirit, and would transform him into the most fearless president. For this type of person, any kind of encounter with adversity or limitations at any age can serve as the crucible for forging the attitude. Though much of the 19th century, American faced all kind of danger and adversity, the hostile physical environment of the frontier, sharp political divisions and lawlessness and chaos that came out of great change in technology and social mobility. We respond to this constructive and environment by the overcoming our fear and developing what come to be known as a pioneer spirit or our sense of adventure and our renowned ability to solve problem. With our growing propensity, this began to change. In the 20th century, however, one environment remained as harsh as ever, the black ghettos of inner city America, and out of such a crucible a new fearless type came forward, exemplified such as James Baldwin, Malcolm X, and Muhammad Ali. But the racism of this time constricted their ability to give full rein to the spirit. In recent times, new types have emerged from the inner city America with more freedom to advance to the highest point of power in America. In entertainment, politics, and business, they come from a wild west like environment in which they have learned to fend for themselves and give full rein to their ambition. Their education comes from the streets and their own rough experiences. In this way, they are throwbacks to the freewheeling type of the 19th century. We who had little formal schooling but created a new way of doing business. The spirit for the first order of the 21st century, they are fascinating to watch in some way, have much to teach us. The rapper known as 50 Cent, aka Curtis Jackson, would have to be considered one of the more dynamic, more dramatic contemporary example of this phenomena and this type. He grew up in the particularly violent and tense neighborhood, Southwest Queen, in midst of the crack epidemic of 1980s, and each phase of his life has had to face a series of danger, both tested and toughened him. Rituals of initiated into fearless attitude he has slowly developed. One of the greatest fear that any child has is of being abandoned, left alone in terrifying world. Is this the source of our most primal nightmare? This was 50 as reality, and he never knew his father. His mother was murdered when he was 8 years old, and he quickly developed the habit of not depending on other people to protect or shelter him. This means that in even subsequent encounter in life in which he felt fear, he could turn only to himself. If he did not want to feel the emotion, he had to learn to overcome of his own. He began hustling on the street at any early age, and there was no way he could avoid feeling fear. On the daily basis, he had to confront violence and aggression, and seeing fear in action so routinely, he understood what is destructive or and debilitant debilitating emotion it could be. On the street, showing fear would make people lose respect for you. You would end up being pushed around and more likely to suffer violence because of your desire to avoid it. You had no choice. If you were to have any kind of power as a hustler, you have to overcome this emotion. No one could read it in your eyes. This means that he would have to place himself again and again in the situation that stimulated anxiety. The first time he faced something with the gun, he was frightened, and the second time, less no. The third time, it meant nothing. Testing and proving his courage to this way gave him a feeling of tremendous power. He quickly learned to value the boldness and how he could push others on their heals by feeling supreme confidence in him. But no matter how tough and hardened by become, heartless usually face one a daunting obstacle, the fear of leaving the street that are so familiar and have taught them all their kind. They became addicted to the lifestyle, and even though they are likely to end up in prison or die in early death and cannot leave the hustling racket. 50, however, had greater ambition than to become merely a successful hustler, and so he forced himself to the overcome of one powerful fear. At the age of 20 and at the peak of his hustling success, he decided to cut his ties to the game and dive into the music racket without any connection or safe teammate, because he had no plan B, because it was either success or at music or go under. He operated his with a frantic, bold energy that got him noticed in the rap world. He was still a very young man when he had faced down some of the worst fear that can afflict human: abandoned violence, radical change, and he had emerged stronger and more resilient. But at the age of the 24, on the eve of the release of his first record, he came face to face with what many of us would consider the ultimate fear, and that of that itself. On May 2000, an assassin powered 9 bullets into him in broad daylight as he sat in a car outside his house. One bullet going through his jaw and coming out with a millimeter of killing him. In the aftermath of the shooting, Columbia Records dropped him from the label, canceling the release of his first album. He was quickly blackballed from the industry, and record executives were afraid to have any kind of involvement with him and violence he was associated with. Many of his friends turned against, perhaps sensing his weakness. He now had no money. He could really return to hustling after turning his back, and music career seemed to be over. This was one of those turning point that revealed the power of one's attitude in the face of adversity. It was as if he were confronting the impossible odds. At this moment, he did as Douglass did, and he decided to ratchet up his anger, energy, fearlessness. Coming so close to that, he understood how short life could be. He would not waste a second. He would spun the usual path of success, working with the record history, rubbing his golden deal, and putting out his music thought, and he would go his own way, launching a mixed rap campaign in which he would sell his music or give it away or free on the street. In this way, he could he could hone the hard and raw sound, and he felt were more natural to him. He could speak the language of the hood without having so too often to soften it all. Suddenly, he felt a great sense of freedom, and he could create his own business model and unconventional as he desired. He felt like he had nothing to lose, and if he last bit of fear that still remained within him, he had uh, bled out in the car that day in 2000. The mixed rape campaign made him famous with the street and caught the attention of the Eminem. We quickly signed 50 to his Dr. Day's label, and setting the stage for 50 meteoric rise of the top of the music world in 2003, and subsequent creation of the business empire he had forged since. We are living through rage, revolutionary time, order in crumbling before our eyes on so many levels. And yet, in such an unruly moment, our leader in business and politics clinch to the past and the old ways of doing things. They are afraid of change or any kind of disorder. The new fearless type, the representation by 50, move in the opposite direction. They find that chaos of the time suits their temperament. They have grown up being unafraid of experimentation, hustling and trying a new way of operating. They embrace the advance in technology and make others secretly fearful. They let go of the past, create their own business model. They do not give it to the a conservative spirit that hunt corporate America in this radical period, and at the core of their success in the premier, a law of power, and that has been known as used by all the fearless spirit in the past and is founded by any kind of success in the world. So, the 50th law is based on the following premise: we humans have generally little control over circumstances. People intersect our lives and doing things directly and indirectly to us, and we spend our days reacting to what they bring. Good things come way following by the bad things, and we struggle at the best we can go to gain some control, because being helpless in the face of the events making us unhappy. Sometimes we succeed, but by a margin of the control that we have over people of the circumstances is depressingly narrow. In 50th law, however, state that there is one thing we can actually control, and the mindset that which we are respond to these events around us. And if we are able to overcome our anxieties and forego a fearless attitude towards life, something strange and remarkable can occur, and that margin of the control of our circumstances increase. At this almost point, we can create the circumstances themselves, which is the source of the tremendous power that fearless types that have thought our history, and the people who practice 50th law in their lives of share certain qualities: supreme boldness, unconventionality, fluidity, and sense of urgency that give them this unique ability to shape circumstances. A bold act requires a high degree of confidence. People who are the target of an audience act and witness it cannot build up believe that such confidence is real and justified. They respond instinctively by backing up and getting out of the way by following the confidence person, and bold act can put people on their heel and eliminate obstacle in this way to create its own favorable circumstances. We are social creatures, and so it's natural for us to want to conform to the people around us and norm of the group. But underneath this is a deep fear that of the striking out of the following our own path, no matter what people think of us. The fearless types are able to conquer of this fear. They fascinate us how far they go with their unconventionality. We secretly admire the response of this, and we wish we could act more likely to us. Normally, it is hard to hold our attention. We shift our interest from one spectacle to the next. But those who fearlessly express this difference compel our attention on the deeper level of the longer duration, which translate into power and control. Many of us respond to the shifting circumstances of life by trying to micromanage everything in our immediate environment, and we sometimes expect it happen. We become rigid, and we are respond to employ and that work in the past. If events quickly and easily overwhelm the loosen control, this follow as 50th law are not afraid of change, and they embrace by being a fluid and possible. They move with the flow of the events and then gently change them in direction of the exploiting the moment. Though their mindset, they convert a negative unexpected event into positive and opportunity, having the burst in death or being remain in a dramatic way of shortness of our lives can have a possible therapeutic effect. Our day are a number, and so it's the best make every moment and to have a sense of urgency. It could end and any moment. The fearlessness type gains such awareness and some traumatic experience. They are energized to make the most of every action and momentum. This give them life, then determine what happened next.